Hello there, church family. Pastor Stephen here. Pastor Kevin there.
As usual.
And here we are. It is Wednesday.
It is.
It's the 19th
Even with your uncertainty, it is still Wednesday.
of this current month, which is August. It is August the 19th. Wow, crazy. So we're working on through the Explore the Bible curriculum on Wednesdays, and this week it's on the choice.
The choice.
You know, there's a choice, okay? People have a choice to either follow God or reject God. People make choices all the time, don't they, Kevin?
They do.
Sometimes those choices are good.
Sometimes they're not.
Sometimes they're not. This is the first week for our kids in school. At
school?
Doing school.
On the computer a lot?
Being schooled. They're being schooled.
Yes, they
I
are.
don't know how you actually quantify that, honestly. And it has been unique, for sure.
Yeah.
And feel for the teachers that are trying to do this. PE. I saw a little clip of that yesterday.
Do a little dance.
Kids doing stuff.
That's hard.
On the other side of a computer, and coaches trying to coach up their athletes.
Yeah, not easy.
Use these apps so we can figure out whether or not you're actually doing these things. And it's like 8 to 4, and they're on the computers, and then lunch times are different. It's different. There's a lot of hard choices having to be made, and you have to do the best that you can. And so
Yes.
we just try to continue to be really gracious with the kids and with the technology and with the teachers. We both have stories already about it. But, at some point you just have to make a choice to say, hey, we're going to make the best of it that we possibly can and hope it doesn't last too long. But
Right.
if it does, guess what? Keep trying to make good choices. So, Kristen probably won't want me to say this, but she picked up on this new show recently, and she doesn't even watch the whole episode. She'll start at the beginning, and then she'll skip to the end and catch these little highlights. She'll call Married at First Choice or First Sight. Married at First.
Yeah, Married at First Sight.
Married at First Sight. And I knew she had already kind of gone through one season, and she would tell me little things about it. And all I knew was there were these couples. They went through some sort of an assessment, and then they were just matched to somebody, and then they have to decide, yes or no, I'm going to marry this person. And he goes straight into a marriage ceremony.
Yeah, hours later, not days, weeks, months.
Yeah, all the work is done by these people to figure out if these people are the right match. So they're basically choosing, we believe these two people are a great match. And then each of those people, the bride and the groom, have to make a choice whether or not they're going to trust the system, and then they get married. And then they don't even see each other. They literally are married at first sight.
Yeah.
It's super awkward.
Yeah.
And
Reminds me of Arkansas.
it's super awkward.
So weird.
But they actually have some interesting, I'm going to say, survival rates.
Yeah.
But they have to make this choice. They're either going to accept this marriage or they're going to reject it and all of that. So that's just one example of choices. And that's extreme.
Slightly.
That is really extreme kind of a thing. I don't recommend that, people. But then there's this idea that we get choices all the time. I mean, how many times have, not us in our marriages that we have, but other people have gotten into arguments with their spouse because, well, where do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to eat?
And actually, because of COVID, the lack of choices on how to do that has not made it any easier. It's still a problem.
Hasn't.
It's still a problem.
So
I hear.
If you're still living in Karn City, if I'm still living in Orange Grove,
Bro, that was easy.
it's really easy.
Yeah.
It's Dairy Queen,
Or Mexican food.
a couple of Mexican food restaurants, the
Yeah.
pizza place that opened for 6 months and then closed and
down.
couldn't sustain.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. But here, there's lots of places to eat. So choices are all around us. We know that. And so this lesson really tries to get down to the most important choice, whether or not we're going to listen and follow God's instructions, or we're going to just reject Him. And one path is going to lead to life, and the other path leads to destruction. And so we're going to get into this. So one of the things that you can hear people talk about right now is analysis paralysis. It's too much information. Back in the day, you had to actually go to the doctor to get some sort of medical information about maybe what's going on with you. WebMD exists. If you go on WebMD and search one little thing,
You're gonna die.
you're pretty sure you have all of it. Like, it's worst case scenario, right? You can't even filter. You're just you're paralyzed by all of the information. So analysis paralysis. There's a question in the lesson. It's like, when has there been a time where you've gotten confused about a choice because there's too many options? If I'm ever going through a season where I'm going to buy a TV,
Oh,
it's awful.
don't do that.
Just forever, right? Because that one might be $50 cheaper, and it might be way better, and then at some point just put it on the wall. And so that shoes for me for a long time was that, had the right basketball shoes, would go everywhere. It was ridiculous. And then, man, I like old trucks. So it's just like, it's always like, ooh, that'd be cool. Ooh, that'd be cool. Ooh,
And I'm so simple. It's just Baskin Robbins for me. I'm just like, 31. Why? Why do I need to pick between 31? I don't
Give me
understand.
all of them.
So they give me the little pink spoon of each of them. Just keep it
just a
coming.
little. So analysis paralysis. I mean, there's times where it's confusing. There's too much information.
Yeah.
And even as we're walking through this pandemic and everything that's going on, there's so much information coming at us constantly that sometimes it's just hard to sort any of it. So sometimes we just decide not to decide, which is actually
A decision.
a decision. And so as we look at this, we're really going to kind of just pull it back to real simple concepts of, we're either hearing and obeying the Lord, or we're rejecting what the Lord is teaching us. And obviously, we were going to instruct you towards listen and obey to the Lord and walk in that. That does not mean everything's always going to work out perfect. Doesn't mean that you're not going to suffer. That's actually something I'm going to talk about tomorrow. It's just that understanding of, hey, these are general principles. When generally applied, they create a general result. And so that's the aim of our lives, is to go that direction.
Yeah.
And so there's these two paths that we'll talk about: obeying instruction or just disregarding it. So the first major point that they make in the lesson is the path to take, and it's Proverbs chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. Kevin, why don't you read that?
Sure. You want me to read all 13 or just 11 and then...
However you feel. Just do 11.
We practice this so much, you have no idea.
We have a choice to make.
Verse 11 says, I am teaching you the way of wisdom, and I am guiding you on straight paths. And the idea being here that wisdom is when we start to see things God's way, when we start to understand that this is how He looks at it, and this is how He would do it. And so one of the key things, I think, in any life is perspective, the ability to see things from some other viewpoint besides your own. The fact of the matter is, guys, Scripture tells us this, we are some evil people, right? And the main reason why is because we're utterly concerned with ourselves first. I mean, that's just it. That's the way you can get 2-year-olds, right? That instead of just being nice little obedient kids, right? The first word any kid learns pretty much is no.
Right.
Well, how does a sweet 2-year-old know that? It's because it's all about what they want. It's all about them, and they can only see the perspective of themselves. And spiritually, gosh, it just seems really easy for people to fall into the same mindset of, well, I perceive it this way. From the wounds that I have that maybe I'm not even aware of, this is how I view this situation. So now I'm going to treat everyone from that perspective. But that's like, do you remember when you were a kid that you sometimes would get those glasses that when you could look at a piece of paper that had writing on it, it would block out certain
decoder
letters.
glasses,
and
right,
you
or
could see the
something?
secret message. And a lot of times we put those on and we think they're all these secret messages, and so we live our lives based off that. It's like, that's just not really the truth and where God's coming from. That God was saying, look, if you'll just take what I'm telling you in my word and lay it out clearly for you and follow it, you're going to be fine. But you have to come from that perspective. And along those lines, one of the things that they talk about in the lesson is they make this statement. They said, life is a journey, and living well involves getting on the right path. And I like that, because I think that so much of the time that we spend a lot of our thoughts on our relationship with God thinking it's more of a test, right? So each day is a test. How much am I obeying God? How much am I following God? Am I going to pass or am I going to fail today? And I guess that's one way to look at it, but that's not really what you see in Scripture. I mean, what's Christianity? What's it originally called? The way. Right? Yeah. It's this idea of this is how then you live. This is how you follow. This is how you get and step behind. And so life becomes much more about realizing that it's not so much about even necessarily my choice for right at this minute, but as in every day when I wake up, the choices I make combined, is that leading to me having God's perspective and following the direction that He's leading? So I don't have to worry so much. I can rest a lot more, knowing that that's what I'm doing every day. I like how Isaiah 42:16 puts it. It says, "You're leading the blind in ways they have not known. You are taking them from darkness to light, from rough places to level places." And so it's not like God's going, "Hey, I'm going to put out this hard thing for you. You're not going to understand." He's like, "No, I'll make a way for you. It may not go where you want to go. It may take longer than you want to take to get there. And it may not be in the vehicle you want to take to get there. But I'm good God, and I have good plans, so you can trust me as I take you on the path that you don't want to go to get to the place you don't want to get there in a way you don't want to do it." And the challenge then is, as we follow Him day in, day out, realizing that goodness, we go, well, if that really is the best thing for me, then now I'm at the perspective, that's what I want for myself. And that's really easy to say.
Right. but it's a general principle, you know, that, we have to be really careful of not buying into a prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we don't proclaim it the same way like the Word of Faith movement would, or that prosperity gospel, we also have to watch out for the poverty gospel, all of those things. And if those are weird phrases for you or whatever,
Google,
you can kind of learn about some of those things. It's important because the overall message is like, this is the journey you need to take. And so what I love about this instruction is he's like, I'm teaching you the way of wisdom. We don't come pre-wired with it. It's not already in us. The sin nature absolutely is. That's why you go from this cute little baby, which little babies are little tyrants. Think about it.
Totally.
I mean, they are totally self-absorbed.
Demanding.
That's all they want. They're hungry, they scream. Their diaper's a mess, they scream. They want to be asleep anymore, they scream. They don't care that their mom has just gone through a very difficult delivery. They just want what they want when they want it. But they're really cute. You know, they're precious little things. And you go like, well, they don't know any better. And then they turn into a 2-year-old. They turn into a tyrant. And so you have to, let's correction. Let's teach you a different way. So the way of wisdom, and what Solomon's telling is, hey, there's a way to learn the way of wisdom. Then he says, I'm guiding you on the straight path. I love the idea that it's teaching and it's guiding. Every time I hear the word guiding, I think of those little bumpers that you can put for the little kids at bowling alleys. You remember we used to go places?
I vaguely remember that.
You could take your family unit places and you could like have snacks and interact with
Were there other
games
people there?
and things. There were other people there.
No way.
Yeah, sometimes those people weren't the greatest. But now it doesn't really matter. I just take other human beings.
Take anybody at this point.
We have at least 15 people in one room. Party! Yeah, crazy. But this idea, those gutters, they would, the bumpers or whatever, they would pop up. Boom. And so little kid can throw a bowling ball. It's not straight at all.
No.
But as long as they put enough oomph to it, it's going to bounce around, eventually going to hit at least some pin. If you get a gutter with those, go do something else.
Not a good day.
Not a good day. But that guide, and I love that that's part of what the Lord is telling us through His Word, is like, hey, if you'll listen to my instruction, I'm going to put up these bumpers for you, and I'm going to give you some warnings. Like, you can force through it and you can jump them, but ultimately, hey, there's a way to keep you on the right path. Verse 12 says, when you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. And so this whole idea, the part that sticks out to me the most in this is I love that the Lord it's always like walk with the Lord, walk in the Spirit, one step at a time. I'm really thankful for that. And watching Caleb kind of grow up and begin to walk, you realize, wow, when you first try to walk, that's hard. You've never done it before. And so even spiritually, when you start walking with the Lord, there's a lot of it that we haven't done before. We've had a whole different way that we've gone about life. And so one of the things that stood out to me in this was the idea of that pace. You learn to walk, and then eventually you can run. And so Caleb's in this phase right now where he got tired of walking, and so now he just wants to go as fast as he can wherever he can. And that has ended up poorly for him. Now, over time, he's developing it, and as a father, I watch him, and I'm like, yo, don't do that. Don't. That's not good. Hey, come back over here. That's not for Caleb. That's hot. Don't touch that. All of those corrective things. Like, it's always out of love, but it's like, slow down.
Right.
You need to slow down. I feel like that's one of the things that the Lord has just over and over again been teaching me in the last couple of years is just slow down. Abide with me. Walk with me. don't sprint the entire marathon of life. And you've got stories that go along that.
Yeah.
For me, personally, this is important. It's like when you run, you won't stumble. There's a time where you will be taking more steps. You will be doing things at a more rapid pace. But the idea is once we get on the right path, then the Lord helps us and guides us in that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that when we're on that path, we're following the Father.
Yeah.
God is never going to call us to create our own paths.
Right.
And to get ahead of Him. Notice that, in verse 11 where He say, I will make level paths for you. When we did Experiencing God, one of the challenges they do is like, how have you experienced God? What names of God? And so for me personally, two of the names that to me are very, very dear are Trailblazer and Pathfinder, because God has shown Himself in my life so many times that if I let Him go in front of me, He'll mark out the path and He'll make a way for me to go. It's those times when I decide to run when I should be walking and I get ahead of Him that it goes badly. It reminds me of a couple years ago, I was in Arkansas with a good friend of mine. He's got a place up in the mountains up there. And while the mountains aren't super high, they're super steep. And so it's really easy to end up off the side. And so I've been there lots of times, and we were out early morning hunting. And so I'm on my four-wheeler heading out to the blind, and I'm making all the right turns. And it's funny, in the dark, things look a little bit different. And I made a wrong turn and didn't realize it. And so I kept going relatively fast. And the next thing I know, I'm hitting these massive boulders. And then I'm balancing the ATV on two tires. And I see it's just light enough I can see a massive drop off right in front of me. And I'm thinking, I don't know that I can back this thing up and turn it around. And basically what had happened was I got too fast and I missed one of the turns on the path. And so I went off road. And it almost ended very, very poorly. And I think that a lot of times as believers, that's what we do. We think that, I've got to accomplish this for God. I've got to do this. I've got to become that. And it's like, why? If you got saved at the cross, did God not already make you what He wanted you to be? Is He already not telling you, hey, follow me and I'll develop you into who you need to be? Walk when it's time to walk. Run when it's time to run. But always behind me. Always following me. And I'll make those paths straight for you. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's good. It's like you're off-roading. You went off-roading while you were off-roading.
Yes.
That's
not good.
That's even worse.
That's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah. Verse 13 says, hold on to instruction. Don't let go. Guard it, for it is your life. That idea of just holding on tight. I think about when GB first came to the U.S. a couple of years ago now, and we went to Six Flags, and one of the first rides that we got on, I think, was Wonder Woman, and that ride's crazy. It's just like this little bitty cart, and one person goes in it, and then the little shoulder thing comes over, and there's only like 8 or 10 carts, and it's single file. So GB, he's right behind me in that little single cart, and there's nothing above you. So you get into it, and that's it. So there's nothing to your side, nothing on top. You're sitting on like a little baby train, but they're about to go, and it's a blast. But I could hear GB behind me, because he wasn't beside me, and all I could hear him is like, Dad, I'm kind of freaking out. And then you see the picture, like when you're done with the ride, you see the picture, and it's just like whatever you could find to hold on to, you just hold on to it, know. And so that's always the picture in my mind when I read things like this, like hold on to it. It's like that, just squeeze it tight. When your kids are scared and they're grabbing a hold of you and squeezing you, that kind of a thing. So he says, hold on to instruction, don't let it go. And that's, really where we need to be when it comes to the instructions from the Lord. They have a great statement in here. The treasure of Scripture makes a difference to us when we place it in our hearts, putting it at the focal point, the core of who we are, to let it shape what our core values are and who we really want to aspire to be, what the Spirit's doing as He works in us. But that idea that we're to guard it, and you think about any time someone's guarding anything, there's a reality like, hey, this is important. I'm not going to let anything interfere with this. I'm going to pay attention to this. We're on watch. So don't mess with this. And that's important. We've got to be able to get to that place in our lives where, at times we let lesser things take up a greater amount of our attention.
Right.
And we can all list off shows that we've watched, and then you start adding up that time, or people playing video games or doing other hobbies or just sitting around,
Yeah.
crossword puzzles, which things in themselves aren't necessarily evil or wicked,
No.
but all those things are lesser things. And so that realization of making sure what matters most gets the most attention and the most of our affection.
Right. It always comes back to me to Matthew 6:33, right? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And we're just never going to get away from that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a useful question to continually be asking yourself, what am I focusing on? What am I centering my life on? Because you're going to be centering it on something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're wrapped up and your head can't get off something, it's like, well, somewhere along the way, I got this idea centered in my head that this was so important. And now if it's avoiding it or trying to protect or comfort myself from it, this is the thing that's in my head. And it's like, whoa, stop. Go back, pay attention. And the biggest way to learn if you're doing this, right, is what's coming out of your mouth. I think about Luke 6:45 where it says, out of the overflow of the heart, your mouth speaks. And nobody likes that. I mean, no one's got that on a bumper sticker, wearing that. It's horrible because we know what comes out of our mouths.
Right.
And it reflects way more of our heart than we want it to. And I think part of the reason why it does is because we've decided to hold on to our woundedness, and we've decided to hold on to other things instead of holding on to the truth of who God is and what he says he is. But even in that, there's grace, because it's that idea of, well, that's part of the journey. Part of the journey is learning how to let go of those things and to let God be the healer and the hope for you, so that slowly what you say starts to change. And I'm not talking about necessarily specific vocabulary, right? But man, I used to talk a lot more about myself, and now I talk more about God and what others he's doing in their lives. I used to, right? I think that's one of the best blessings of the Christian life, and a sign of maturity is when you're able to go, I used to. Someone goes, well, what changed? You're like, it's the funniest thing. I don't know. I didn't just set out and go, I need to not do that anymore. But as more I've walked with Christ, and it's like, oh, that's what changed. You stayed on the path. Right? It wasn't a list of requirements of behaviors. It was like, oh, you just followed Jesus. You just abided with him. Aboded with? I don't know how you say. I don't know that. You were in his abode as you abided. Yeah. And so that's just huge. That changes everything. And so it's not a list of rules to follow. It's a relationship to engage in daily. Right. Where there's room for all kinds of errors and mistakes. So... with that being said, there are some things that you want to avoid. So on the path to avoid, let's read verses 14 and 15. Keep off the path of the wicked. Don't proceed on the way of evil ones. Avoid it. Don't travel on it. Turn away from it and pass it by.
Don't go there.
Don't go there.
It's just don't go there.
When they were writing this, paper was hard to come by. As a matter of fact, this was probably written on the hide of something, so paper was very important. And so I think it's pretty huge that 4 times Solomon goes, let me tell you how I really feel about this. And I'm going to repeat it 4 different ways so that you can get it through. And it's like, well, you think it'd be obvious for us that the path to avoid. And I'd say I think that Solomon says that because it's easy for the wrong path to sneak up on you and for you to end up on it without even intending to. Without even really having, it's kind of like my ATV thing. I just got ahead of myself. The next thing I know, I was off the path, and it took me a while to realize it. And then I had to backtrack. This is for us. And guys, in a time and place with the added stress of what we have now, I think this happens to us so easy. And so many of the things that we're dealing. And look, I see it acted out most in this way. How do people treat people? Yeah. Right? We struggle to really fulfill what God says of loving our neighbors ourselves. That's hard. That's hard on a good day. So you add stress on top of that, and suddenly you start watching the way that people treat each other. Gosh, it's just not very Christian a lot of the times. And we get it. We understand why people are under stress. There's all kinds of stuff. And yet at the same time, it's like, hey, well, you got to stop at some point and go, how did I get here? What was it that led me, that I got off the path, that now in something that I believe deeply in, my response is being to be really mean to people. Or my response is to go into crazy protective mode, or hyper passive aggressive, or to completely isolate. And these are just examples of people that we're interacting with. And it's like, I don't even know that they realize how much they're hurting. Right. That you can't even go, hey, whoa, it's okay. It's all right. I think that's been my heart response to people more than anything. I just want to go, whoa, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. it's easy to get confused.
Well, and we have a lot of conversations
Slightly.
about abiding and about what does it look like to truly understand the love of the Father
Yeah.
and the being able to walk with Jesus and to rest in the Spirit, all those pieces. But even like the greatest commandment, like, well, what's the greatest commandment? And then Jesus gives them, 1A and 1B, right? He's like, well, you're to be fully connected to the Lord and with everything. I mean, all of it, like whatever you are, is connected to all of Him, and that's so pivotal. And he's like, and then he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. And we have a tendency when we talk about love your neighbor as yourself, we have a tendency to go like, well, somebody was being mean to somebody. You're not loving your neighbor. And what we begin to think is like, well, what is that? How does that connect to their relationship with the Lord? And it typically is either a bad understanding of who God is,
Right.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, like a bad understanding of that. And then it comes out in negative ways, like, well, God must be only wrath, and so now I'm going to be wrathful to everyone else.
Yeah.
Well, God only has righteous anger, so now I'm going to just flex anger all the time. But the other side of that too is if you don't have a proper understanding of who God is and that you are actually loved by Him,
Yeah.
then it's almost like shame and guilt cause you to treat other people in such a way because you don't really know what it's like to be loved by the Father. So you don't even love yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that cocky arrogance that you think you're the best ever, but at some point you have to get, say like you got to be comfortable in your own skin. That doesn't mean you just do whatever you want, but like at some point God created you. He put His image in you. You're wired in such a way. You got your own circumstances that make up your life, but He wants to be in all of that with you. And if you can't appreciate God's work in you, then you're not going to love other people well because you don't even like yourself.
No. And so you'll overreact in crazy ways without even thinking it. You'll even justify those overreactions. Let me just use myself as an example. So one of the issues that God originally had to work with me and still works with me on a continual basis is because of things that I'd done, I just really didn't approve of myself. And if I didn't approve of myself and think I was worthwhile, then there's no way that God could. And now, I had never said that out loud, but that was very much the belief system in my heart, right? What do we just say? What's in your heart? Guard it. Be careful. That's what I believed about myself. So I think it's just two people in my life, how it impacted them. So the first was my little sister. So she had done nothing wrong against me, but in order to make myself approved, I had this high standard and high list of things that I had to do for God to like me and for me to halfway feel okay about myself. And somewhere along the way, you know what I decided? If that list was good for me, it was good for her. So I would get mad at her for not living up to the criteria that I set for her, which is absurd. I mean, to even say that out loud, you're like, what? But that's how I did it. And it took God working a lot in me and having some hard conversations with her where I just realized, man, that's all me. My problems with her are all me. They're not her at all. And that was humiliating, and yet that was so liberating at the same time. In the same way, because I didn't improve myself, I really struggled with Jolie because my thought was, I know who I really am, and I don't really like myself, so there's no way that she can really like me. So when she acted like she liked me, I was like, there's something wrong with her. Right? No, there's something really wrong with me. But that's how I would take it. So that when she made comments and said stuff, I'd be like, she's got to have an ulterior motive. It's like, what do you mean when you say that? She'd be like, I just mean what I say. And I'd be like, no, because the ears that I was hearing it through, the filters I was hearing it through was like, there's got to be more behind that. And so I would pester her enough until she'd get angry, and I'd be like, that's how she really feels. That's the dumbest thing ever. But it's what my heart believed. And it took God slowly unpacking that and working that out. And so our challenge in this time is like one of two things is going to happen and should be happening already for a while, hopefully, is, man, either you're going to start slowing down and walking on this path, and God's going to go, hey, can we talk about this and why you act this way and why you believe this? And can I tell you what I'm really like? And the Spirit starts doing some soul work on you that's painful and wonderful at the same time. Or we double down on those false lies that we believe, and we become people that no one want to be around. And it's because they don't know how to deal with that kind of angst and that kind of frustration. So just kind of pay attention to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Out of the overflow of your heart, your mouth speaks. If there's not some grace and forgiveness and that coming out of you regularly, I would say you're probably not receiving that. And God says that he offers that all the time. And so that might be a clue for you to stop and go, why do I feel stressed? Why do I feel angry? Why do I feel scared? Why do I feel shame? Why do I feel lonely? And to actually slow down and take that to the Father and go, what's going on there? Because he'll tell you.
Yeah. And there's those two extremes, right? And they're so unhealthy. And once you start seeing them, you go like, oh, okay. It's the pendulum of like, you can get into an unhealthy spot where like, I'm the only one that's right. And squeeze, like just squeeze it
so
tight.
hard.
You know, I'm the only one that's right. And it's like, that's one view of that. And then I'm worthless.
Right.
Like, I'm worthless. I have nothing to. I'm worthless. No one cares. I don't care. Nobody. I mean, I have nothing. And then, so I mean, that's the pendulum, right? That's the swing. And I think what's crazy is when you and I, combined 40 years of ministry,
Yeah.
and been with ourselves for 40 years, and it's whenever someone who's the pusher, the mover, like boom, always has something. But when they hit that spot, and just life kind of just crushes you and compresses you, that person has a tendency, whenever it comes unhinged, to swing really quickly all the way over here.
Yeah.
Because the system or the thought processes get broken down, and I mean, it just crumbles. Now, the beautiful thing is, we've talked a little bit this week about what happens when you get to the end of your rope. It's like, well, first of all, let go, because where did you even get that rope?
Yeah.
But trust the net and the rock at the bottom. But but that idea of when you get to that end of that rope, and what do? The system that you built that you had a lot of confidence in, if that's not the Lord, then at some point it crumbles.
Yeah.
If it's your marriage and your spouse dies or leaves, if it's all about just what your kids are going to accomplish and then they move on, and yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things. If it's that job you worked for so long and then now that's over,
right?
There's so many different pieces that come into that, and the Lord is always wanting to expose what we're trusting besides Him.
Yes,
and that's part of the work of the Spirit, and it's out of love. It's like, hey, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Like, come back to this path.
Right.
And so there's that warning, like, hey, avoid this. Don't go there. And we stuck there a long time. That was good, though.
Yeah.
16 and 17, for they can't sleep unless they have done what is evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. Talking about those whose heart is foolish and wicked and evil, and that's all they plot. That's all they come up with. I think that phrase is, for me, it's, how could a human being do blank to another human being? When you read about it and you hear stories just of awful atrocities that people do to other people, I mean, it's sickening. And you go, how could they do that? Well, that's the path of destruction. That's the path of wickedness. That's why we have to be careful the path we choose, because I can't remember the old Adrian Rogers quote. It's like, be careful if you let Satan in the car, because he'll take over and he'll take you further than you wanted to go. It'll cost you more than you ever wanted to pay.
Stay longer than you intended.
You'll stay longer. There you go. Yeah, thank you.
You should write that down.
I should write that down. Google it. It's there. It's great. Not my version, the right one. But that whole idea, like, there's a slippery slope. How many times have people said, I never would have thought that person would have.
Yeah.
Or I don't know why I said that. Or I don't know why I did that. People will say that. But it's they get to a certain point and they continue on that path, and then there's this breakover point that's bad.
Yeah.
18 and 19 says this: the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, shining brighter and brighter until midday. But the way of the wicked is like the darkest gloom. They don't know they don't know what makes them stumble. It's that picture of the sun rising in the morning, and then by noon it's bright and you can fully see. But then whenever it gets dark outside, it's a different ball game.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
And so just being aware and paying attention, and then as we get into that that third last point that they make in the lesson is the choice to make. And that's verses 20 through 27. We'll take a couple of those at a time. Verse 20 says, "My son, pay attention to my words." That happens all the time in our house. Hey, are you paying attention? Pay attention. Drivers in the RGV, are you paying attention?
No, you are not.
No one knows what to do with a four-way stop around here. Pay attention to my words. Listen closely to my sayings. Don't just hear them in the background, but listen to them. Be attentive to them. Don't lose sight of them. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and health to one's whole body. Guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life. Some great instructions there. Pay attention. Fix your eyes. Remember to look to those. Keep them. Even guarding God's word and instruction, how it's good for your whole body.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, in the lesson they have this statement highlighted. It says, "If we let our hearts be filled with senseless thoughts, we'll pay a price in senseless actions." So the heart is the core of what we believe. The head is what we think and what we know. The heart is what we believe. And believe it or not, your heart will trump your head every time. So what you know to be true, your heart has the ability to trump that. And so we have to be uber careful what we let in our heart. And the fact of the matter is that we have some great stuff in our heart. I believe that Jesus loves me. I believe he died on the cross for me. I believe that I'm his child. Those are all great, wonderful things. They're warm blankets for our souls. We also have things that we've let into our hearts that are just lies. And if we're not careful, lies about God and who he really is and his character that just are not true. Lies about ourselves and who we are and what we believe about ourselves that are just not true. And those things will kill us. So on Sunday, when I was preaching, Simon didn't think that he was going to have his identity met outside of what he did. And so Peter's evaluation was this: you have bitterness in your heart. And it's going to eat you alive. It's going to kill you. It's a poison that will drag you to destruction, is what it says in that passage. And it's like, guys, we've got to stop and be aware of, gosh, what are the things that I'm believing in my heart? Because that's the wellspring of life. And so if I'm believing truths there and letting the Spirit, I'm gonna find wholeness in every aspect of who I am. And if I'm believing lies, then I'm going to be getting bitterness about myself, bitterness about God, bitterness about other people. And from the inside out, that's going to eat me up. And it's like, goodness gracious, if we base our lives on those things, it just ends so badly. And so there's that reality of, man, am I looking to the Father who as I get closer to him, gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and I can see things more and more and more clearly? Or am I going in a direction where things seem to get darker and it's harder to focus on who and what God is, and it's harder for me to see who he is, and it's harder for me to feel about who I really am? These are things that we have to be so very careful about.
Yeah, verses 24 and 25 go on and say, "Don't let your mouth speak dishonestly, and don't let your lips talk deviously. Let your eyes look forward, fix your gaze straight ahead." And he says, don't let your mouth, James talks about this, right? And, that little rudder can change the course of an entire ship.
Exactly.
And so he says, don't let them, which means they want to.
Yeah.
In our natural sin nature, like it wants to come out. We want to say that thing. And that's why, so much of the work of the Spirit is like, what's the passage? Lord, put a gate over my mouth.
Yeah.
And it's like, so much of that is like restraint. And restraint on your own is fatiguing. To just say, I'm not going to do these things, I'm not going to do that thing, I'm not going to say that, I'm going to treat these people. Like, we can only do that for so long. And in the midst of the last 6 months, where every week seems to add another layer of awful in some way, shape, or form, like I can even think back to the last 6 months and watch patterns from my own life and go, oh wow, I've felt that heaviness. I felt that implosion, what feels like an implosion in my soul deep when I hear news about this. Or even those moments where like, hey, I feel pretty good today, and I'm excited about this, I'm hopeful. And then realizing like, wow, every day really is different.
Yeah. And
so I think that the key here, and when we're talking about abiding, what we're doing is we're basically saying like, on a daily basis, you have to come before the Lord and say, align my life to what you desire for me.
Yeah.
Like, let me align my ears to hear what the Spirit's trying to say to me, to how He's moving me. And we'll talk about that on Sunday when we get to Philip and how the Spirit's working in his life. But just that awareness. Well, what's the statement? Yeah, they've got a big statement. It's a little wordy, but from an awareness of God's purpose of our lives, we're able to make wise choices about how we spend our days. So the concept is, once I understand that God has a purpose for me, He's aware of me. I'm not just some little ant in a hill that He doesn't know about. If we come from that perspective, then we're able to make those wise decisions on a daily basis. And just coming back every single day and saying, Lord, align me to what it is that you have for me and the path that you have for me to walk is so important.
Well, and realizing too, that the call of God, we tend to try and make that something grandiose and something big.
Right.
And that's not what you see in Scripture. The call is to be intimate with the Father. The call is to know God and to love Him with all that we have and all that we are. And we want to make it, well, no, that's you two, your calling should be pastors. No, our calling is to be intimate with the Father. Now, out of that, God might say, hey, part of how that intimacy is going to be expressed now is it's going to be, you're going to do this for this season. And that's fine and good. But that's what the ultimate call is for everyone. And everything else that we try and do is just behavior modification, And the reason that it's hard, to keep that gate over our mouth is because what we said, Luke 6:45, it's like out of the overflow of our heart, our mouth speaks. So it's a whole lot easier for us to go, I'm not going to open my mouth and say this. And then it looks like I'm aligning myself with God. When I think the picture I get in my head is that the invitation of the Holy Spirit is when I wake up in the morning to walk in, to put on some sensors all over me, and He takes an EKG of my heart and then He holds it up to His heart. It's like, oh, we got a blip here. We got a blip here. Your heart's beating, you're still alive, but there's a blip here that's not on His. Let's look at what that is and see what that is and start working on that. So that I can then that day start going, oh, I need to align my heart. And those blips are not bad. I think they're part of God's crazy grace and mercy that goes, hey, here's an area where you're not aligned with me. I'm not going to crush you for that. Instead, I'm going to say, let's get to the core of that. I'm going to heal you of that.
Yeah.
How different, right? When you start going, God's out to punish me for when I do bad, to God realizing when I'm not aligned with God, it's because I'm hurt in some way. And God's desire should bring healing to that. Right? Now you start to understand what we're talking about. Oh, what a different perspective. And it's like, yeah, once biblical, God healing. Right? You've read the Bible, what it says that at the cross, everything was taken care of. So why are we walking around in this great fear of punishment if all the punishment was soaked up at the cross? It's because our perspective is wrong. So we still think that God's up there waiting for the other shoe to drop on us to hammer us. We're not aligned with Him in His heart. And so now we have to make choices. And now I have to behave a certain way so God will like me.
Right.
And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We missed it.
Yeah, when it was said, it is finished on the cross, we have a tendency to walk through life going, if I mess up one more time, then I'm finished.
Yeah.
Then it's over. Then He's going to remove that love and care for me, which is terrible theology.
Terrible.
Verses 26 and 27, carefully consider. That's what this whole lesson really kind of draws the net to. And that's the challenge for each of us. Carefully consider. That take time and reflect and think about the path that you're walking, the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Don't turn to the right or to the left. Keep your feet away from evil. He's saying, once you know the path that you're on, stay focused. Don't turn to the left, don't to the right. Just stay focused on that. And that's what we all need to consider that. So take little Caleb, a lot of illustrations about him all the time, right? Because he's just constantly learning. There's a lot of places that he walks. He loves to be outside. He loves to walk around. He's got this little sidewalk area where we can make laps. But there's definitely a spot where it looks safe. It's flat. It's concrete. I mean, it's just the driveway. But at a certain time of the day, if he gets out of the shade,
not good.
It doesn't go well. And it's not the first step or the second or the third. It's after the momentum of that decision gets to a point and he gets to the spot where he stops and he's standing there because his body's telling him something's not okay here. Something's hurting. And when he looks around and there's not shade anywhere close, almost feels isolated on that island and he's just around pain. And then just, what does he do? He just screams. He doesn't know what to do. The beautiful picture is when we find ourselves in those moments, that the Father comes and goes "Shoo," and picks us up from that spot and will carry us to a place of shade.
Yeah.
And then the Spirit guides us like, hey, that's not the path you want to go again.
Yeah.
Remember last time?
Yeah.
Come on, let's stay over here. Let's stay over here. And so we find ourselves in those spots all the time. Those little pings and those moments you're talking about, like the EKG, like those won't stop happening in our lives this side of eternity. And so we can really look at those as a gift from the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is then we don't have to worry about like, well, am I staying on the path? Am I doing that? It's like, look, God said he would make a level path for us. And then I love what it says in Isaiah 30:21. And your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. And I love the fact that, that even then we're giving the promise of the Holy Spirit, saying, hey, don't have to worry so much about staying on that. If you'll stay close to me and listening to me and abiding to me and aligned with me, I'm going to walk right behind you. And if you start going left, it's like, oh, no. Keep going straight on this one. Hey, now it's time to turn right. And I love that fact that instead of judgment again, we're promised a guide to go in front of us to make the path, and a guy behind us to go, this is how you stay on the path. It's like, if we'll just abide, it's almost impossible to fail. And I love that, right? Instead of going, here's the crazy high standard. God goes, there was a crazy high standard, but I already met it. And now I'll show you how to walk on this. And to me, that's just very comforting.
Yeah, I like in that verse the little phrase like "This is the way." You know, Disney Plus came out, right? And they came out with the Mandalorian, and so they have like this whole kind of creed, or the whole system's built on that value.
Yeah.
It's like they have certain things that they know. This is the path that we take, and so they'll just say, regardless of the circumstance or what's happening or what it's going to cost them, like this is the way. This is the way.
Yeah.
And we ultimately know that in John 14:6, Jesus said that he was the way. And so that's the path to follow. We look to him, we fix our eyes on him, and we want to follow him. The Spirit helps guides us in that. And it's all towards and underneath the umbrella of the Father's love.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So we're grateful for that. So there are 3 big points that they make: the path to take, the path to avoid, and the choice to make. Consider the path that you're on. And if we can help you out as you navigate through your journey, reach out to us, and we'd love to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. Love you guys.